They were like brothers, political allies who fought together. Two men who promised to transform Senegal and indeed the entire African continent. And right now, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko are basically tearing each other apart in a power struggle that could destroy West Africa's most celebrated democracy. This could shake the entire Pan-African sovereignty movement down to its foundation, because just months back, nobody could touch these two guys. They swept through Senegal's 2024 presidential election on pure youth energy, anti-establishment rage, and promised to change everything. Supporters were chanting their names in the street. Even vendors couldn't print enough t-shirts with their faces on it. Musicians were writing songs about this unique partnership. Then last week, and indeed even before last week, but let me start with the most recent escalation. Last week, President Faye made his move. He kicked out a Sonko ally from their coalition leadership, just removed her, and brought in Aminata Toure, a former prime minister from the old administration they both fought against. Now, Sonko is not happy about it and he hit back hard. His party basically told Faye he doesn't have the power to make those calls. They said they don't share values or principles with Toure, and that's when the wheels came off. Now, within hours, Senegal's bond market crashed to 4-month lows. Investors started panicking. Even IMF negotiations hit a brick wall, because this isn't just politicians fighting. This crisis is happening while they are sitting on more than $11 billion in hidden debt that nobody knew about until the new government took over back in 2024. Now, the economy is shaking. International lenders are pushing debt restructuring that Sonko calls a national disgrace. But here's what really matters: what's happening on the ground. Because even on social media, in the hearts of millions of young Africans who thought Senegal was different, who believed this movement could work, now they are asking themselves, was this all fake? Is the dream of African sovereignty dying right in the front of all of us? Now today, we are going to dig into how this revolution cracked, why economic desperation is fueling this political war, and what this fight means for Africa's future. Let's get into it. Back in March 14, 2024, two men walked out of prison into Dakar's street to massive celebration, because hundreds of thousands of people were chanting their names. Vendors wearing their faces on their t-shirts. Musicians, they are writing songs about these two guys. 7 months later, those same streets are now divided. Some supporters are now asking, did we just trade one struggle for another? This is how Africa's most celebrated democratic revolution is facing its biggest test yet. March 24th, 2024, on election day in Senegal, Faye and Sonko looked unstoppable. These tax inspectors will not bow to Macky Sall's government. The men who spent nearly a year locked up for challenging what they called corruption and authoritarianism. Now, their campaign posters showed them side by side. The slogan became a battle cry. Young people in Senegal and indeed all across West Africa saw hope in Sonko and Faye. Now, Senegal, the region's democratic anchor, it is supposed to show that youth-led reform movement could transform governance through elections, that democracy could deliver what authoritarianism was only promising. But here is the thing that complicated everything, something that would test this revolution to its core. Sonko couldn't run for president. He has already been convicted back in 2023. Charges, he said, were politically motivated, and indeed, it was really politically motivated. So Faye stepped up as the candidate. The substitute Sonko picked to carry on with the revolution, while Sonko will serve as the prime minister. That was the arrangement. Now this question will follow. Will Faye work to clear Sonko's legal problems once he becomes president, or will he grab his own power and hold on to it? Faye won with over 54% in round 1. They took power. They promised radical transformation in Senegal. But power changes things between people. Sometimes it shows tensions that were always there. Now we can only imagine that we asked these questions even before they came to power. What could happen when two revolutionaries build their movement from behind prison walls? They either become partners for life or they end up fighting for power. Faye and Sonko were supposed to be the first of his kind. They were supposed to be the revolutionary that will bring change in Senegal. But even strong bonds, they get tested. Sonko went to prison in July 2023 after violent protests broke out following his conviction. He faced multiple charges, including threatening state security. Faye got arrested in April 2023 after he posted on Facebook criticizing the justice system during Sonko's legal troubles. They charged him with undermining state security, defamation, contempt of court, and acts likely to compromise public space. Now, both of these guys, they shared the same prison cell. Even during their presidential campaign, Faye ran the PASTEF presidential campaign. PASTEF is the political party that brought them to power. His detention basically became campaign headquarters. Politicians and strategists found ways to communicate with them even inside prison. Now, November 2023, with Sonko blocked from running because of his conviction, they made the call. Faye would be the presidential candidate. Sonko endorsed him, calling it a rational choice, not emotional. He praised Faye's competence, honesty, and integrity. Faye accepted the offer, obviously. They released him in March 14, 2024, just 10 days before the election. Now, he won big. He made Sonko prime minister. The story seemed clear and almost a perfect story. Sonko will govern alongside Faye. They will share power and push their revolutionary vision together. But here's what people weren't talking about openly. Once Faye became president, questions came up about whether he would use his presidential authority to fix the judicial injustice that blocked Sonko, through constitutional processes, of course, and judicial reforms, even other mechanisms. Some thought Faye would work to rehabilitate Sonko's legal standing. Whether he acted or didn't act, these decisions will shape everything between them. By July 2025, 4 months into their partnership, you could see the tension. Sonko was publicly questioning Faye's leadership style. The alliance was straining, and it all came down to competing visions of power and governance. Now, the fault lines between these two guys became very obvious in July 21, 2025. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko drops a bombshell statement that echoes across Senegal. He says the country doesn't have a crisis, it has an authority problem. Many people heard that as a direct shot at presidential leadership. Now, President Faye's first move was to deny any conflict, but that denial wouldn't hold for long. Sonko's critique hit multiple levels. He expressed frustration about insufficient defense against opposition attacks. He questioned some of the president's priorities and travel. Most importantly, he hinted at dissatisfaction with the pace and direction of governance. The PASTEF party supporters started splitting. Some defended Faye's constitutional role as president. Others backed Sonko's more confrontational approach. The underlying tension, though nobody was saying it directly, was about Sonko's ongoing legal restrictions. His conviction, it is still standing up to this day. He still couldn't run for future office. And while Faye governed as president, people kept asking whether he would or could address these legal obstacles. Now, Faye's public response stayed measured. He said there was no conflict between them. He even emphasized their partnership. But behind closed doors, something else was happening. Faye has started making appointments that signaled a shift towards what some called pragmatic governance. He was bringing in experienced administrators, technocrats. Critics said he was moving away from the more radical elements of the revolutionary platform. Sonko watched all of this unfold in real time. He would have stepped aside to let Faye become president. He would have taken the prime minister's role and stayed prime minister. But he was watching the revolutionary vision being adjusted, moderated, and watered down. And in his view, the revolution is already compromised. He no longer have vote of confidence on President Faye. Now, by November, the tension would blow up into open confrontation, and the cost would be massive. Now, just a few days ago, specifically on November 11th, President Faye makes a move that turns private tension into public war. He announces he is removing Asisatu Mboj, someone that is closely aligned with Sonko from her position coordinating the ruling coalition. He replaces her with Animata Toure, a former prime minister who served under Macky Sall from September 2013 to July 2024. He makes this decision alone without consulting Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. The message is crystal clear. The president is taking control. Now, just days before that, at a major Pastef rally in Dakar on November 8, Sonko had publicly defended Mboj. He had dismissed speculation about her removal. He signaled her position was secure. Faye's action looked like a direct slap to the face of Ousmane Sonko, a demonstration that presidential authority beat party loyalty. But choosing Toure as replacement added serious symbolic weight to this crisis. Toure wasn't some neutral technocrat. He has been justice minister from 2012 to 2013 and prime minister from 2013 to 2024 under President Macky Sall. The exact administration Faye and Sonko had campaigned against. She was a UN veteran with 24 years of international experience. She held a doctorate in international business from a French-linked institution. For many in the Pastef party base, she represented the old system, not revolutionary change. Plus, tensions already existed between Toure and Sonko. Now, reports are now emerging that Sonko had previously made allegations against her from her time in government. Her appointment wasn't just administrative, it was ideological. Faye was signaling a shift towards institutional governance, away from what critics called revolutionary populism. Sonko's Pastef party fired back immediately. They issued a statement saying President Faye doesn't have authority to dismiss Mboj from her coalition role. They refused to recognize Toure's appointment. They stated clearly, "We don't share values or principles with this new appointee." Now, right there, the governing coalition fractured publicly and unmistakably. Faye had drawn his line on the sand. The political calculation was transparent. Faye was consolidating control over coalition structures ahead of the 2029 presidential election. By removing Sonko-allied figures and installing his own allies and experienced administrators, Faye was positioning himself to govern independently. He was basically preparing to sideline Sonko's political influence, even while Sonko remained prime minister. Now, by November 12, that was just yesterday, Senegal's financial market reacted to all of this crisis. The country's bond market dropped more than 3 cents, hitting 4-month lows. Investors got nervous. IMF negotiations stayed stalled because everyone understood what just happened. The government was fighting itself. And in West Africa, when leaders turn on each other, confidence disappears very fast. Here is the context that makes this political rupture so dangerous, because this Faye-Sonko confrontation isn't happening in isolation. It's playing out against Senegal's most serious fiscal crisis in years, because more than $11 billion in previously hidden debt stalled IMF negotiations and collapsed investor confidence. Now, when the Faye government took office in April 2024, an audit revealed what the previous administration had hidden. According to investigations by Senegal's Court of Editors, confirmed by the IMF, the Macky Sall government had deliberately understated public debt by about $7 billion. Some reports even said total hidden obligations could exceed $11 billion when you count all off-budget borrowing and arrears. Senegal's actual public debt was nearly 100% of their GDP, not the 74% they officially reported. Now, the IMF response was freezing its $1.8 billion financial support program until they got clarification and reforms. November 6, 2025, an IMF mission to Senegal wrapped up without agreeing on new lending. The fund said significant debt vulnerabilities existed and various options to address them had been discussed. Among those options, it includes debt restructuring, where Senegal would negotiate with creditors to reduce, delay, or modify its debt obligations. But Sonko rejected this publicly and forcefully. At a rally November 8, he called debt restructuring a disgrace for Senegal. He argued it will signal the country had borrowed money it intended to misuse. He declared Senegal would meet its debt obligation with its own means. His rhetoric connected with nationalist sentiment and Pan-African critics of IMF conditionality. But economically, the plan faced serious challenges because Senegal's tax revenue keeps falling short of projections. Sonko's recovery plan assumed government could finance 90% of development programs through domestic resources alone, requiring revenue growth of 31% in 2026. Now, that's 3 times the historical average, and according to independent analysts, it is highly unlikely without major structural reforms or new revenue sources. Faye's position seemed more aligned with accepting some IMF engagement and fiscal adjustment. Now, this has created an ideological and practical divide. Sonko was defending sovereignty, rejecting external conditionality. Faye was pursuing sustainable governance and international credibility. The clash over economic policy mirrored their broader power struggle. Now, the financial market rendered their verdict very fast because Senegal's international bond fell hard. The 2033 bond dropped to around 69 cents on the dollar. Yields approached levels that typically signal default risk. Investors understood the fundamental problem because when a government president and prime minister can't agree on managing a debt crisis, economic policy becomes unpredictable and risks they shoot up very high. While political leaders argue in the capital about authority and principles, consequences are hitting across the country, and nowhere is that more visible than in reactions from the young people who powered this revolution in the first place. Now, when you go to the social media space across Senegal right now, you will see something striking because young people who voted overwhelmingly for this revolution are starting to question what they have achieved. Comments showing disappointment, confusion, betrayal are flooding social media. The revolution's base is breaking apart. The Pastef party is facing internal crisis. Now, young party activists are splitting into camps. Some defend Faye, arguing as president, he must assert constitutional authority and make hard governance decisions. They say maturity requires moving beyond pure revolutionary rhetorics. Others stay loyal to Sonko, seeing him as the authentic voice of the movement, the true guardian of the revolutionary vision. Now, political influencers and young organizers, grassroots networks across Senegal, they are all being forced to pick sides. Even the party organizational structure built over years of opposition struggle is straining from within. Regional comparisons are also flooding social media. Kenyans note similarities to their experience with the Uhuru Kenyatta-William Ruto partnership. That alliance dominated Kenya's 2013 election with public displays of unity and brotherhood. And by 2017, it had collapsed into political rivalry. Kenyan analysts warn Senegalese observers that power sharing between strong personalities often fracture under governance pressure. One Kenyan commentator captured the concern, noting the brotherhood and partnership that once seemed unbreakable has been brought to a halt. The question now, will Senegal's circumstances allow reconciliation, or will the rift deepen beyond what Kenya experienced? Social media posts they reference other West African power sharing crises, suggesting Senegal might be repeating regional patterns. The fear, if the party split completely, if the youth base fractures between Faye and Sonko camps, the old political establishment defeated back in 2024, they could make a comeback. Now, the dream of transformative governance could become a cautionary tale, a revolution that couldn't survive its first year in power. But what happens next? Several scenarios are possible, and each of these scenarios will take Senegal and potentially West Africa in very different directions. Now, here's what political observers across Africa are thinking, but few are saying it loud. Senegal stands as a crossroad. Either Faye and Sonko find genuine reconciliation and rebalance their partnership, or this revolutionary project risk ending in internal conflict and governance paralysis, or the return of the old political forces they once defeated. West Africa is watching. The Pan-African movement is holding its breath. Scenario 1, what I can predict, reconciliation and genuine power sharing. Faye and Sonko should negotiate a new arrangement that clarifies roles, respects both authorities, focuses on their shared reform agenda. Maybe Faye should explore legal pathways to address Sonko's conviction, clearing obstacles to his full political participation. The ruling party currently holds the majority in parliament, which will give them room to negotiate internally without coalition collapse. Now, after July tensions, they exchange public solidarity gestures. If both prioritize the revolutionary project over personal power, reconciliation stays achievable. Now, my second prediction and scenario 2. Faye consolidates power while Sonko gets sidelined. The president builds alliances with technocrats like Toure and distances himself from radical positions and negotiates with the IMF. He prepares for independent re-election in 2029. Sonko keeps grassroots loyalty but loses state control. The risk is huge here because mass mobilizations could erupt. Sonko's supporters might hit the streets. Sonko could resign to lead opposition. Now, the party unity could be destroyed. Senegal's stability could also be threatened. My third prediction and final scenario here is Sonko reasserts dominance through party structures and popular pressure and backed by the party hardliners and street mobilization. He forces Faye to retreat from recent decisions. But this carries dangers because investor confidence could collapse entirely. IMF negotiations might fail. Debt servicing becomes unsustainable. The economic crisis deepens until governance becomes impossible. Now, the scenario 4 is full rupture leading to early elections or coalition realignment. The party split. Faye governs with moderates and technocrats. Sonko leads radical opposition. Old opposition parties exploit this division. Senegal's democratic trajectory fundamentally alters. Another scenario that I am seeing here is constitutional crisis and instability. If Sonko resigns or gets dismissed and supporters mobilize like in 2021 and 2023, mass unrest may erupt. Security forces face hard choices. ECOWAS or African Union might intervene and Senegal's reputation as West Africa's stable democracy shatters. The country joins regional states in political crisis. Now, the Pan-African implications are profound. If Faye Sonko fails, it strengthens argument that democratic movements can't survive fiscal pressure and governance compromises. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, they are pursuing military-backed sovereignty. They can point to Senegal as proof electoral politics can't deliver independence. Now, the Africa First narratives, they weakens. Key questions driving conversations here are, was Faye genuinely committed to revolution or using it for power? Did Sonko miscalculate choosing Faye? Could Faye have addressed Sonko's legal barriers but calculated a constraint Sonko was advantageous? Or are both of these guys sincere but facing incompatible pressures? Because in West Africa, revolutions often consume their leaders. Senegal was supposed to prove democratic process and youth mobilization could create transformation without violence. But if Faye and Sonko can't resolve differences, if their coalition fractures into factions focused on power and not the people of Senegal, Senegal answers the continent question. Can African revolutionary movements survive opposition governance, or does power inevitably corrupt even the idealistic partnerships? The answer is being written right now, in real time, in Senegal streets, in government halls, and in the hearts of millions who dared to believe change was possible. Now, if you have watched to this point, I want to say a very big thank you to you. This is Frontline Africa, where we talk about geopolitics from Africa's own point of view, where we bring you the stories with the kind of details mainstream media does everything to avoid. Now, if you are in Senegal or someone that is interested in what is happening in Senegal, go to the comment section and tell us your opinion in all of this. And personally, I am heartbroken because I followed Senegal's politics when Macky Sall was running the show. When Macky Sall was busy selling Senegal to France, Macky Sall was representing the old guard. And these two guys came in as revolutionaries. They came in as visionaries. They were supposed to set Senegal as an example for the rest of West Africa. But what they are doing now is a disgrace. They should put their ass together and work for the people of Senegal that supported them and risk their life against Macky Sall back in 2021 and even in 2023. They must stop this fight. They must find a way to resolve this crisis. These are the issues, and these are my personal opinions, by the way. And if you want to continue to see my content, maybe consider to subscribe and turn on those notifications. I am your host, Ezekiel Enejeta, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye for now.